No mai, haere mai, and welcome to the Mystic Discoveries podcast with me, Amanda, your host, where I am on a mission to talk to as many people from as many different spiritual perspectives as possible, just to uncover what we all share in common and to strive to understand our differences. Full disclosure, my spiritual context could be described as anthroposophical, or I could be described as an esoteric Christian, all of which will be discussed in podcasts as time goes on. But for more information on those two ideas, you can listen to the previous podcast I did specifically on Rudolf Steiner. There's also a podcast about Manly P. Hall and an interview with Kai Pacha, the YouTube astrologer. Also, his name is Tom Lesher. So last year, I began this podcast, and just as it was gaining momentum, I became pregnant and developed full-on morning sickness. Our son Phoenix was born in January this year, and he is a bundle of joy, currently playing with his toys in a basket next to me as I do this. Now that he's a bit older, I've had that impulse to return to this podcast. This weekend just been, I recorded an interview with Annie Haas, who lives in the US and is a Waldorf homeschooling mum. We met through Instagram and her feed is amazing, and I really encourage you to go check her out and follow her. I'll put the link to her Instagram page in the show notes. In this podcast, we talk about Rudolf Steiner, of course, what Waldorf education is, her daily schedule or rhythm when teaching her children, screen time, junk food, the economic system, and slow life down south. Lots of other things too, but that's basically the summation of our conversation, which I found super interesting. While listening back when I was editing it, I had to do a lot of editing because Skype kept cutting out and I ran out of space on the hard drive. Things that I will get better at as time goes on. Anyway, when listening back, I thought that I should preface it with a few points. Yes, Phoenix. I used the new curriculum area in New Zealand, which will be an extension of the technology curriculum, the new digital curriculum, as an example of the current education system wanting to bring a lot of head or thinking elements into early childhood and primary school. You'll probably hear that I'm a little bit down on it, but after recording the podcast, I talked to a teacher at a school I'm connected with, and she mentioned that the Waldorf schools have actually been in contact with the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education have allowed Waldorf schools to develop their own version of the digital curriculum. And she was using, as an example, children following and designing their own knitting patterns as a precursor to learning coding when they get older in the upper school. Because I personally don't have an issue with children in high school learning about these things. It's just when they're a bit younger, I feel like they shouldn't. And that's a little bit controversial, I know. The other thing I wanted to mention, and Phoenix is talking too, is that I realized I need to interview somebody in the anthroposophical community, and it has a much wider reach than what I mentioned in the podcast. So not to worry, in the very near future, I'm going to be talking to quite a few people, I believe, that will have connections to the anthroposophical community. I feel like it needs to get out there a bit more, but actually they're making steps to make sure that it's happening. So it would be cool to hear what is going on there. Last point, please forgive the sound quality. I was using Skype and recording through my iPad, as I have very basic recording things at my disposal. So in the future, I'm aiming to get some good podcast recording gear, but it costs money. So I'll have to either save my pennies, or if you feel like you want to donate to making this podcast super awesome, you can by going to PayPal, and you can pay themysticdiscoveries@gmail.com, and I can buy some good recording gear. Until then, we'll just have to have a makeshift recording setup, which is fine because the information is the main part anyway. Anywho, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Annie, and I hope you do too. Please subscribe through iTunes and let me know if you have any feedback. tell all your friends this exists, because I'd love for this podcast to grow, and I really want to interview lots more people, particularly people that are part of the anthroposophical community, Waldorf education, biodynamic farmers and that kind of thing. But also I'd love to talk to people that have knowledge on Māori spirituality, Indigenous spiritualities, Buddhist people of the Islamic faith, just anybody in general that has a perspective to offer that I think we might all find interesting. So without further ado, I will leave you to listen to our interview. Please enjoy. Hello, Annie, and welcome to the Mystic Discoveries podcast. It's really nice to have you here finally.
Oh, hello, and thank you for having me.
Yes, I've been really excited about this. Waldorf education is really awesome, and it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who's as passionate about it as I am. You're possibly more passionate about it, since you actually have kids invested in it.
Maybe, I don't know. Hard to say.
That's true. Hey, could we start by you just having a little intro and telling us about yourself and who you are, what you do, and your family life and such?
Sure, no problem. Well, I was raised by kind of young, bit bohemian parents in New England, but I now live in the South, where I have really dove into the culture and the soul of the South, having been here for 20 years now. So first half of my life is in New England, and the second half down here in the South. So giving away my age here, I'm approaching 40.
Right.
I come from a long line of ancestors who were artists and painters, sculptors, musicians, composers, photographers, and also a couple of world travelers. So I grew up with a lot of art and music and a lot of freedom, and just tons of music and art. So that's the wild, passionate, and sort of rebellious type. So the spirit of rebellion was always surrounding me when I was little, just through art, through music, expressing yourself. My grandfather was a cowboy jingle writer who built a recording studio out of a barn when I was 2. Ed Labunsky.
What's a jingle writer?
Writing commercial jingles, songs for commercials.
Oh, jingles, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wrote a couple of famous commercial jingles that you might know, like "Celebrate the Moments of Your Life." He wrote that one. He wrote some for Chevy and American Airlines. And
wow.
So we have a lot of creatives in the family. So, and also, he brought in a lot of money that way, but then it wasn't long after that he actually died, and tragic. It was in a car accident, and so we were poor again. So I've also been in and out of lots of different social classes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've had stages of my life where, we were doing really well, and others where we were doing not so well. And my dad traveled all over the world, from China to Saudi Arabia to Egypt, and he always sent me currency from all these countries as a gift in the mail. And when he was home in America, he would take me to coin shops in New York City as a little girl, and in the car on the way, he would play everything from Bach to Beethoven to Bob Marley, and when I was 19, I moved down south to Charlotte, North Carolina, with my mom, and I played jazz flute, and I studied recording techniques. And the culture and the spirit of the South really affected me at this point.
Right.
It was the birthplace of the blues down here.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah.
And it was, if you go even further back, you know, we had the Trail of Tears here from the Native Americans. And so there's sort of a sad spirit in the South. But also what's really amazing is that throughout this, there's also a spirit of sort of overcoming sadness that really kind of embodies this area.
You really hear it in the music, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you can hear that all over the world. You can kind of get an idea for the soul of the South. So, you know, everyone from all over the world has drawn from this sort of deep soul of the blues, and then it goes into rock music, and which is the ultimate rebellious spirit.
That's for sure.
Rebelling against the sadness. So, So, you know, another thing I really love about the South is it's very down home and slow. And so, as a Waldorf mom, I really like the slow living. Everyone here has sort of a history of sitting on the porch and playing music.
Nice.
And that kind of speaks to me.
Yeah.
There's an old man I drive by in the country, and he sort of waves to everyone that passes by. He just has his chair, and he sits out, and I think he's probably retired at this point, but he just waves to everyone that passes by. So there's a lot of slow living in the South. It's not, you know, especially in the country, but, you know, and then there's that Southern hospitality. So I've really gotten used to the South, and then, you know, so that, and I've gotten acquainted with a lot of the farms and the farm life here, and that slowness. So eventually, though, I did move to the mountains for a little while here, and I studied art and got married there. And so I now have 3 kids. They're aged 16, 9, and 5.
Yeah.
And we're Waldorf homeschooling all 3.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, my oldest is doing a bit of online school. Helps. He's not entirely Waldorf homeschooled. I just bring him sort of the anthroposophical part, just what he needs for his age.
Yeah.
But he's kind of already knows what he wants to do, so he's going in that direction.
Yeah. So does your husband work full time, or does he take on some of the teaching as well?
Well, he does work full time, and he is in finance, but he does take. He helps me quite a bit with the math element.
Oh yeah.
As an artist, I'm probably least strong in that area, and my husband is very strong being in finance, so he really comes to the rescue with a lot of the math, so I can bring them enough math. That's
so good. I always found that, teaching handwork, it's kind of different, but watching class teachers, they get to about class 4 and it's fine, and then suddenly in class 5 and 6, there's this massive leap, and by class 7, if you're not a maths expert, you really need to pull in the experts just because of the depth of knowledge you need for maths and how advanced it is. It's quite, and I don't know what it's like in America, but compared to state schools in New Zealand, the Waldorf maths in class 6 and 7 is almost high school level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think, yes, it depends maybe on the school, but yes, I think you're right. It can get very complicated the older they get through the grades, so it's really needed. Math help assistance, but so that helps, and I'm really strong with the English and the arts, so I can bring that in.
That's good.
So then that's good balance, yeah.
That's really nice, and it's nice that both of you get to take on that role too, of teaching and parents. Just share the load a little bit, eh?
It does help, yes.
That's so good.
Because it is a lot on me, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, teaching in general is a big job, plus parenting on top of that. It's quite a lot. So
it is a lot, and yes. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no. What were you going to say? It's quite a lot of work.
It's a lot, and also it's, I think what many moms are struggling with right now that are trying to Waldorf homeschool is the multiple ages,
Mm.
doing them all at once and figuring out how to, especially, I mean, I feel for those moms who have the kids very close in age. Mine are a bit spread out, which helps, but if you have them close in age and you have, say, 4 or 5,
Yeah.
bringing 4 or 5 main lessons in is a challenge. So I think the Waldorf homeschooling community is trying to find solutions to that and work through that. And so that we can, and still take Steiner's indications, but bring them. So that's where we really need to look going forward.
Yeah. To bring in Rudolf Steiner's indications, you mean?
Yes, but still, because he indicated for a school and not for a homeschool. So
Yeah,
it's hard
of
to
course.
translate that to the home environment sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so true. We got to do a lot of work
Yeah.
ourselves, eh? He left a lot to be discovered. He didn't tell us what to do for everything.
Exactly. So we just have to take what he did say and
Yep.
sort of, and work with it in the best way we can.
That's so true. How did you come across Waldorf education and anthroposophy?
Well, I first came across Waldorf education while I was growing up in Vermont. I had driven past Waldorf schools, and I also knew moms who homeschooled in that way. So it was just there as a background, and it was kind of a distant curiosity. But I was a teenager, so that's as far as it went. I will say, too, though, that I went to a semi-private school that was very heavy in the arts, and that definitely had an impact. It wasn't a Waldorf school, but it had many of the same aspects that a Waldorf school has. And I spent most of my teenage years exploring Vermont and camping and biking and swimming, being outdoors. I studied music theory, guitar, and I felt a deep connection to nature through my teenage years. I read a lot of philosophy books, but I wish I had read more Steiner because that would have helped me a lot as a teenager. Yeah.
Do you think as a teenager you would have had the capacity to understand what he was saying? Not you specifically, but I just wonder what teenagers think when they come across Steiner's
That's a really good question
work.
Because he's very dense, a very dense
so
read.
dense.
But I think it depends on your temperament. I think my temperament as a teen was I was into that really heavy, I was a bit melancholic, and I really wanted that. I just wanted that heavy philosophy. I read a lot of poetry.
Right.
I like to brood over things for a really long time.
Yeah.
Whereas, like a sanguine personality might just be too, it might be too busy.
Yeah.
For that kind of, or maybe just to,
Yeah, I do.
I really needed that, and I wish I had found it then. So when I finally became a parent myself, it was just such a relief to read Steiner because I had already been kind of going against everything mainstream.
Yeah.
And I just really, I just had this feeling society was ill, and when it comes to its treatment of childhood and newborns and everything, and childhood wasn't really being protected. Like I felt like it needed to be just a little bit, or treated with more dignity than it was. So when I read Steiner, it was as if my own inner self was speaking, and I really felt like he understood the human being. So I started Waldorf homeschooling, and it was one of the best years of my life.
With your son?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you were about to say, was it with your son?
It was. It was my oldest. And so he had been in public school, but it wasn't working very well. He was just, he was just not very happy. And he didn't want to do the work, and I could tell that he was more creatively and artistically inclined, like all of our ancestors.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't meeting that need. Of his. So when I started Waldorf homeschooling him, he just was thriving. He just really he loved the curriculum. So it kind of, and then over time he healed from his years from school. Like it just felt like we were getting a connection, and he was starting to really enjoy education. And yeah, he's really, we just had a very deep connection after that through the curriculum. We did sixth grade, so I remember sitting out. We were in the mountains then, and we were in kind of a cabin in the woods, and we were sitting on the porch reading the the sixth grade curriculum goes into the Roman history. And so we were reading all these stories, and his eyes were just open wide, and he just really also loved all the hands-on building and things that we did, and the things that we made for that history block and everything. And so it was nice to be a part of an education that was living, and that the child enjoys, just so much, because it just speaks to where they are at that stage. So that was just huge, and it was one of the best years of my life and probably his life. And so then we just were like, well, this is it, this is what we need to keep doing. So that's kind of how I came across it.
Did you have your children in an actual Waldorf school at one point, or have you always been homeschooling?
So from there on, because we were in a cabin in the woods, and I felt like a little Waldorf island. I was like, well, I need to find more people doing this. I need the support. There was a little bit on the internet, but I didn't feel like it's enough. I wanted to meet some people in person who were also working this way. And so my husband also he had graduated from finance school in the mountains. And so he needed to move to a city to start a job. And so I said, well, there's a Waldorf school in, near Raleigh and in Chapel Hill. And so why don't we move there, and you could get a job, and we'll go near the school. We'll go to the school. And so that's what we did.
Oh, right.
And so we a real sense of community here at the school. So we were there for a few years. And I really learned a lot in the years that we were there. But it is hard to have 3 children financially. It's hard in a Waldorf school to stay.
Because in America, it's fully private, right? Is it?
It is. It is fully private, and full tuition is about, especially for my high schooler, I think it's about $14,000 per child. So, yes, you have to dig deep in the pockets for that one.
You really do.
They do offer tuition assistance as needed, but even then, if you have 3, it still might not be enough. And some moms have even 4 or 5, and so it really becomes undoable. And I think that's when people are like, okay, well, let me try to see how I can do this myself at home, but still stay connected to the school. And the anthroposophical branch, so we still go to, the festivals and stay connected to the anthroposophical branch, but I'm still doing this on my own, so.
Wow, that's really interesting, because in New Zealand, the school I was working at is partially integrated, so the government pays for the teachers' salaries and will pay for the maintenance on the buildings, but in exchange for that, we have to do the New Zealand curriculum and the Waldorf curriculum. So the fees are heavily subsidized. So the parents are they're paying for the extra teachers like the eurythmist and the handwork teacher, and paying for new buildings and things. So I think our school was 4,000 New Zealand dollars a year. But it's interesting, because I think some parents were leaving the integrated schools because they're not Waldorfy enough, because we have to meet government obligations as well. So it's quite interesting that in America, people can't go to the Waldorf schools because the tuition is too high, but I imagine the schools are more, what's the word? I don't want to say purist because that doesn't sound very good, but they're way more in line
have more
with.
freedom.
There you go.
So it sounds like, comparing to where you are in New Zealand, is that we do have the private schools. There are Waldorf charters here as well.
Yeah, I've heard of
though
them.
there's not in my state. In other states there are.
Right.
And, but for the private schools, I think the teachers are in a hard spot because they do have the freedom from the government. They don't have the government interference, but the social atmosphere in America is as such to where the parents might feel like they have social pressure to keep up with the other public schools, so that the parents will even pressure maybe the Waldorf teachers to be more academic.
Wow.
Just through social pressure. So it depends. I mean, there's a spectrum at Waldorf schools of parents who are very into the anthroposophy, all the way through to who are just, okay, this is just an alternative, a nice alternative, and they might not necessarily be so anthroposophical, so they might pressure the teachers to be a bit more academic, even in the private schools. I'm not sure how much it works, but there is that element.
Yeah, that's true. We still find that as well in terms of parents still wanting that high academic achievement as well. But I guess that's probably in every single school everywhere. You're going to get people on either ends of the spectrum. Yes. But it's interesting how different schools are working with these issues. And yeah, it is very
interesting, and it's neat. I didn't know that about New Zealand, so that's really neat too.
Yeah, it's quite a blessing. It's one of those things that it's like it's a blessing, and it's also something difficult to work with. But in a way, I think it's been positive, just in that it's made teachers take a little bit more care in terms of planning and accountability, but it's starting to go way to the other way. They're burning out because it's just so intense, the amount of work that they have to do. But yeah, I don't think I'd ever be a class teacher.
Obviously, in an ideal situation, you would have the financial support without the strings attached.
You would. In that ideal world. But that's okay.
Yes, in an ideal world. Then you'd have the freedom and you'd have the resources, but that would take a lot of change in the way people view education.
Oh, a massive amount of change. So thanks for going slightly off topic there, but it's really interesting to compare what's happening in different countries. It's cool. I like it.
Very neat.
We're quite far into the podcast, but I thought it would be good just for people who might be listening that have never actually heard of Waldorf education for us to just talk about what it actually is. Well, when I was just preparing a little bit for this, it's funny because I feel like I have quite an in-depth knowledge of what Waldorf education is, but when I tried to think about putting it into a sentence, I was just like, my mind went blank. So I went to the Wikipedia page just so that I could get a little snapshot, and it was quite relevant, really. And they just said that Waldorf education is based on the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner, who was the founder of anthroposophy, and the pedagogy or the teaching method places importance of the role of imagination in learning, and it's a holistic approach in that it aims to combine the intellectual with the practical and the artistic. Or if we were talking in Waldorf speak, we would say that we're teaching to the head, the heart, and the hands. Although I kind of like to put it in the other direction and say the hands, the heart, and the head, just because we go from early childhood, we're teaching through the practical with the hands or the will. And then we go into the middle school or primary school where we're teaching to the feeling life or the heart. And then we go into the upper school or the high school where we're dealing with the intellectual head thinking element. And I think
Yes.
this is based on Rudolf Steiner's, and not just Rudolf Steiner, actually, lots of people have this picture of the developing human being, that there's no point in shoving lots of logical thinking information into a 4-year-old, because that's not where they're at. They're developing their will, they're learning through their body, they're learning through doing, and they're learning through imitation. And so it's pretty much making everybody's life easier by educating the child, like you were saying about your son being like thriving on that class 6 curriculum, because that's where he was at. He was really interested in Rome because that's where he is in his spiritual and physical and emotional development. Whereas if you try and teach all that Roman stuff to a 5-year-old, it's mostly going to go over their head, or they're not going to listen. So, yeah, teaching
Yes.
to where they're at.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that we resonated with was the deep connection, and then, okay, so yes, it's a very human way of learning, and it just seemed to really be human rather than a more robotic
that's a good way to say
of learning.
Yeah.
And it takes into account the non-physical things that we don't see, instead of just seeing the child as this, a hunk of meat with a brain, and we need to just shove things into the brain.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the consciousness and the inner life of the child is also the central focus of the whole thing. So it's thinking of their consciousness instead of just what's outside that we need to put in.
Yeah.
So the actual experience of the child matters, and it matters a great deal. And so, think of it this way: if we had childhood to go experience all over again, how would we want to do it? What would we fill our souls? What would we want? What would we yearn for? And certainly it wouldn't be lots and lots of facts.
Yeah.
A thirst for facts comes later in life from a deep touching of the soul earlier in life, and so arts and beauty should play a large role. And so I think the greatest intrusion into childhood is early adulthood. Just too much intellect too young. It's an intrusion, and it just gets in the way, and then they get burnt out. And you can see a lot of children, if they have too much intellectual learning earlier in life, you can see they're kind of burnt out by middle school or high school. They don't really want to learn anymore, and that's not good.
No, you're right. It seems like we talk about it often. It seems like the university curriculum has crept further and further down, just in terms of what the people governing, I guess, national curriculum want children to learn. And we've just, in New Zealand, the government has decided that they want to make a new curriculum area which is based around computer literacy, so as well as learning maths, language, and all those kinds of things starting in kindergarten. They want to bring in like how to do coding, and that's going to be mandatory, as in teaching children who are like 5 and 6 how to code, which is, it just doesn't.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's just it. That's because apparently we don't have enough coders in our population to keep up with the demand. But it just shows a real lack of understanding of what it is. Well, one, what the world is going to look like in 20 years when these 5-year-olds are going into the workforce. But also I just really can't comprehend that these children have more space in their brains for coding. It boggles my mind that that's an appropriate thing to teach children.
Yes, and well, we have to think too about, okay, so maybe they be master at coding, but they will have nothing, what content will they be coding? What will there be to code?
That's such a good point.
They'll have no arts and no human thing to draw from to create those codes. There's nothing wrong with coding.
No.
But they should be doing that at maybe teenager, maybe beyond, it would be the age for that after they have really discovered what it means to be a human being. My son took apart, he was in a Waldorf school for 7th and 8th grade, for middle school, and for 8th grade they had to take apart a computer and put it back together again so that they could really understand, okay, I have power over this thing, and it doesn't have power over me. But for a 5-year-old, it would be a really foreign, thing that, there's not a lot of understanding of what is this thing that I'm controlling. They're doing it automatically. So, yeah, we're losing this unfolding of the human being gradually.
Yeah, and I mean, when do they get that chance to actually learn, if they're quote unquote mastering these machines or language or maths so early? It's like, well, when do they get a chance to master their own being, their body and their movement and all that kind of stuff? But this is why Waldorf education is great, everybody, because they get the chance to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a growing movement. The Waldorf movement is growing, so that's encouraging. But it is definitely up against a lot. And so the divide might be growing.
Yeah.
And so, but we'll see. I have a lot of hope for the future of education. But it's great that if we can, just even get the word out there, because there are still a lot of people who don't know what it is. So
exactly. I had a conversation with my mum when I went to study Waldorf education when I was training to be a teacher, and I was telling her about it, and she was just like, I wish I knew that these schools existed when we were younger, because she would have sent us to a school. But the thing is that, she didn't know that they existed, and there's still a lot of people out there that don't know. So we've got to...
Yeah, and we kind of need to come out of a little bubble a little bit and reach out.
Agreed.
To the broader, and the internet is helping with that.
Yeah.
So that's good.
It is good. Again, we went off topic a little bit, but that's okay, because it's very interesting.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this chat. It's really good. So there is an anthroposophical... Oh, sorry, I'll go backwards a bit. So you homeschool, which is wonderful. I was just wondering if you could outline or describe a little bit what your daily routine is like.
This year we start with, we're kind of, yes, I've been working on my daily rhythm. We have a daily rhythm, and then we have week rhythm, but then we have more of a seasonal rhythm, and then we have, yearly rhythm, which would be the festivals. So our daily rhythm would be that we start kind of with morning chores. We do breakfast and we have tea. My children really love having tea every morning. It's just a cozy way to start the day, and they like picking a flavor of tea out.
That's so sweet.
Yes, it's a slow hour, sort of between about 8 and 9 o'clock, and we just sort of do our own thing. We're making beds, and we're picking up and kind of getting ready for the day and having breakfast, and so that's kind of nice. There's not a morning rush if you don't go to a school. That's kind of the nice thing about homeschooling, is we can have a hot breakfast and we can begin slowly.
Yeah.
And my girls, when they're done, might go play outside for just a little bit while I get ready for the day. And then kind of between, I don't really do a schedule. I do more of a flow, more of a rhythm. And I think there's a difference between a rhythm and a schedule. A schedule is very sort of a bit strict, on the nose, and we kind of have this more of a rhythm, like a flow. So between 9 and 10, anywhere between then, we'll do a circle time with my youngest, my 9 and 5-year-old, while my oldest will then begin doing his online lessons. He's taking a business course and a science course online, and so and he does it downstairs with us. Those are still kind of a part of the more being with us, and then during circle, we'll light a candle and we'll say a morning verse, and we'll sing a song, and and then we'll play a little bit of music, but it's not a full music lesson, and we'll do some finger plays and story with movement, and I'm really trying to work on becoming a better storyteller and also using movement and speech that Steiner recommended, which is, really focusing on my speech and the consonants and how and the movement, so sort of bringing a little bit of eurythmy, not full eurythmy, just a rhythmic movement into the storytelling. So that is, and there is an anthroposophical woman who is helping me with this and kind of teaching me how to do this a little bit. So that's nice. So after this, we go from about 10 to noon. We do main lesson. I do main lesson with my fourth grader, and my kindergartner just has free play then. So she'll either kind of copy what we're doing by drawing, or she'll go off and just play. I have kind of a Waldorf kindergarten set up at home where we've got painting out, we've got, drawing paper out, but we also have a kitchen center, and we have a little play areas, and I have silks and everything so that she can kind of have just free play while I do main lessons. So that's how I juggle having the different ages in the morning. And her personality also, my youngest, who is in kindergarten, she prefers alone play because she's very more introverted type, and so she can play for hours alone. So that's a blessing. It really helps me focus on my fourth grader. I think if she was a more outgoing type and needed to be around other children, I'd have to reorganize this so that she was, doing something, else, or I don't know. But this worked out really well for me. So then after main lesson, we have lunch all together as a family. My husband actually comes home from work, so we have an entire family coming together for lunch, and we play games. We either play card games or a board game with lunch as a family around a big table every day. Unless someone has a meeting, you can't come home for lunch. We do that every day. So that is really nice.
That's so special.
So we, that's really, really helpful. And so then after noon, we then do the more extra things, not the main lesson type things, but the extra subjects. And I also bring in the kindergarten rhythm in the afternoon. So we have a soup day, and my youngest chops veggies, like they do in the Waldorf schools, and my fourth grader will do all the measuring, and then my teenager will play a leadership role, and so he manages the recipe.
So clever.
So there is, and so because I have one child in each of the 7-year cycles.
Oh, you do? How appropriate.
So so I've got one in the in the hand stage, one in the heart, and one in the head. So for when we are doing baking and cooking and everything, I put the teenager, who would be the head, in charge of the recipe and figuring out the timing and the oven and everything, and the leadership role, which is what he needs at this age. And then so my fourth grader is when they do third, fourth grade, they do measurement. So she's in charge of measuring out all the amounts. So that helps her with that aspect, and then my youngest will be doing the chopping and the stirring and all the hand elements of the cooking and baking. So that works really well. And if you have kids close in age, it'd probably be more where mom is doing all of the head. Children are doing the hands or the or the measurement. It depends. After then they have outdoor time, in the afternoons. It depends on the day, but we also have the extra subjects. So we'll do foreign language or music lesson or handwork, and so that's what we do kind of afternoon. And then when they're completely done with everything, probably about 3 o'clock, give or take, and then they go and play with friends. So they just have the rest of the day just for play.
That's nice.
And they go to the neighbors. So we do screen-free weekdays at home, so there's no screen time. Aside from my teen does his online work, but there's no screen time for all three of them during the week. And on the weekends, they might get a little bit, like they could watch a show or something like that. But I really want them to focus on, on themselves during the week. So, so we'll watch a movie as a family on the weekends, or they'll have a little bit of screen time here or there. Because I'm not a stickler with no screen time. I think if I do none, then when they get older, they'll just want to do way too much.
Yeah. And that's a nice balance, actually, because, Reese and I have just become parents recently, and just as a teacher, I would always be like, screens, they're so bad. But now that I've got my own kid, and we've got our own traditions we're starting, of course, he's only 7 months old, so he has no screen time ever, but we're still kind of thinking about, when he gets older, it will be nice to have, like, a family movie night. I mean, he has to watch The Goonies at some point, and all these great movies that we watched when we were kids. But I wonder, have you noticed if the kids have had screen time during the week or whatever, have you ever noticed the effect that it has on their schoolwork at all, or has that not ever arisen?
We haven't done that in a while, except for when, if someone is sick, sometimes I'll let them watch many, many episodes of Little Bear on Netflix or something. I love Little Bear. But I notice if they had too much screen time of any kind, they start to it's like their brain goes on the fritz. They just kind of get really short-tempered. They're quicker to snap. And their brain is moving too fast. Because it's fast, it's so fast-paced that they can't, it goes into their bodies. So their bodies start just making all these weird movements and gestures. And so that's, why, when I started noticing that, I really was like, whoa, because I used to be like, watching too much TV isn't a big deal. I grew up watching lots of TV and I'm fine. And I really used to believe that. But I think the more I got into Waldorf education and the more I saw, then the more I realized, no, this really does affect their brains in a really big way. So that's, now we do limit it, and if we don't, I do notice a difference. But they are so limited now that they will, when they have screen time, even my 5-year-old will pull herself off. She goes, I just had too much screen time. She'll say, I need a break. It's just hurting my eyes. She'll say.
So interesting. Wow. That's really cool. I like that you've actually put it, you've actually noticed the difference and made the change because you've noticed how it affects them, as opposed to just being dogmatic and saying, no screen time ever, or I'll just let them do whatever. You're actually doing what Rudolf Steiner would have said, which is, this is the ideal, see what works for your family, and adjust accordingly to your family culture and what is right for your kids. And that's really cool that I like hearing that tempered approach to it. And it's really neat that you're actually, I don't know if it was intentional, but now your kids realize, that's too much. They can self-manage it a little bit now.
A little bit. The more they get older, the more they can self-manage it. I think it's just become such a part of our family values and the way we view the world that it just becomes autopilot. I do the same thing for junk food. So we don't do a never, but I mostly bring healthy food into the house, and I will let them have junk food on occasion.
Halloween?
I remember I started to do a thing where if they wanted to get something out and it had all these ingredients that were just, just chemicals and all this stuff. So I would say, okay, we can get that and you can eat it. I said, but you need to try to read me, this is with the older child, you can read me the ingredients first before you eat it. And so there would be like 30 ingredients and they would be like maltodextrin, but, and they couldn't, they couldn't really pronounce it. So then by the time they're eating it, they're like, I don't know, I can't believe I'm eating all that. It's not just eggs and flour, it's all these other things. So I think it's the same approach that you could do where you're really teaching the child that there's a reason that we're doing this. It's not because we're trying to be mean. It's because this doesn't belong in your body. And I think, that's harder when they're younger. You really just have to say, well, because this is what we do.
Yeah.
But as they get older, you can say, oh, well, as long as you know what you're putting in your body, then okay,
Yeah.
And so my teenager now has a real education about health and about screens, and because we just constantly have those talks about what it does to the brain and the body, and so then they can self-regulate more the older they get.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a monster.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you want, because he's going to go out into the world on his own soon. Well, not that soon, but eventually.
Yes.
And you want to know that he's got that inner authority that will help him make the right choices, or when he makes the wrong choices, will be that guide to bring him back to center, as opposed to just
the inner voice, of just okay, I know these things now, and so that can really help. So I think I know that families really struggle with junk food and screens, and those are the things where it's like it doesn't need to be all or nothing, but we I think it's a tough thing. I think that's probably what scares people away from Waldorf a lot, because it's really hard to get a handle on those things.
Yeah, it really is. Cool. How are we doing for time?
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Cool.
I'm having my tea, and I'm
nice.
sitting here next to the chalk drawing and doing good.
Good. So, do you have an anthroposophical community around you?
Yes, there is. There is an anthroposophical branch here, and I attend many events when I can get to them. I can't get to all of them. They have a lot
of positive.
Events, especially around the holidays. They have a lot of the holy nights and everything. So, and then there's also informal groups that meet and just chat about Steiner. So maybe some moms will get together and chat about Steiner.
Cool.
Things like that. So I'd be interested to know about other areas and how many other areas in New Zealand do they have?
Yeah, well, there's
a branch there where you are.
There's a national branch that runs a conference every year. I've been to one, and then there's a local branch, but I never went to any of the local ones. It's quite small, only because the school hub served its purpose with me, and most of the anthroposophical community were the teachers anyway. So lots of stuff was run through the school, so I didn't have to venture out. It's not outside of the school. It's not massive, but it's growing. And their outreach in terms of their conference that they run every year, they're reaching out to not just anthroposophical people to come and talk, which is really cool, because they're making different connections. But yeah, it's not huge. The schools, I don't know if it's the same in America, but the schools are like the biggest anthroposophical hub, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Well, here it seems that the branch is separate from the school, and I had only seen them interact very little. So,
right.
But it is a small branch too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's mostly older. It's older people.
Yeah, same
on
here.
the branch, and I would like there to be sort of a more young people in the branches, and maybe that is what is needing to happen.
I think so, because I think I'm possibly, well, I wouldn't say I'm one of the youngest, but I'm not actually a member of the branch, but I'm involved in lots of stuff. But I do see that it's, in terms of the branches itself, it's a lot of older people. And you're right, it'd be great if there were younger people.
Yeah, there might be a lot of reasons. I mean, I think it's also hard for parents of young children to participate, because they're busy with their families.
Yeah.
And the older folks have a lot more free time to organize and go to all those things. So that might be one reason.
I would say so.
For it. But, yeah, I think there needs to be more, I think maybe as the movement grows, more young people might get involved. I'd love to see it anyway.
I'd love to see it too. I'd say so. I think I think in New Zealand, I think a lot of it will be, I think more and more people will be drawn in through schools, through the parent evenings that teachers run, and then by extension they might come to like you know, the Holy Nights things or the Christmas plays, and it might go out, it might grow from there. And then there's biodynamic farming, which is another pull in, but it's not huge.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. And I wonder also if younger people look at like the anthroposophical movement or whatever and kind of look at it as almost like joining a church and would prefer to be involved but not actually, I don't know, be part of it so much. I'm not quite sure. I'd be interested to talk to people about it actually. I should have somebody on the podcast about it actually. Maybe I'll sort that out.
Yes, you should. Yes. Seek out all kinds of people so we can get a broad spectrum of experiences.
Definitely.
And then we'll find out. I'm looking forward to listening to them.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. I've got lined up a few people, so it will be cool.
Great.
Yay. So, do you and your family have a set of spiritual beliefs or practices? And if you do, how does this influence your day-to-day life? Big question.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with lots of freedom. I had no religion. I do think my ancestors were probably Protestant, but I didn't grow up with a religion, but I did grow up with a very spiritual mother, so that's just within me all the time.
Right.
So I grew up with a mother who talked about God lots, and that was not an uncomfortable thing, but at the same time I never went to church. So she was always talking about our inner life, though, and so I think that might be another reason why I was drawn to Waldorf, because it really is a big focus on the inner life, and my mom was always focused on her inner self and forgiveness, and also just, really working on yourself all the time. So I think I would consider myself more of an esoteric Christian, focused on the power of thoughts. I talked about the power of thoughts, and if we knew how powerful our thoughts were, we might think again before thinking certain thoughts.
Yeah. Gosh.
So, I like to use that power, an imaginative power, within myself. And so I use the word imagination a lot in our house, and this influences my day-to-day life for sure, because we highly value creativity, and so even in thought, so creativity in thought. So how else can we think about something, instead of in that way? So my children are always problem solving, like creatively, because of that. When a problem comes up, I notice that they try to think of several different solutions, and if that doesn't work, then they'll try to. And that's another thing that Waldorf does, is try to, look at things from many different angles. So I walk them through imagination while they're lying in bed at night. So I lay with my girls while putting them to bed. I used to lay with my son, but not so much needed anymore. And so I walk them through their imagination. So we'll do a verse, or I'll say a little story, and we do that every night, so that the last thing that they're thinking before they drift off to sleep is an imaginary picture. Bring them, into that sleep consciousness. So, and I we're always talking about, imagine how you want things to go before you go to bed, and it really gets them in touch with non-physical before they sleep. And so that's just becoming a habit. So that's kind of a way that we have prayer. And I do use a lot of Steiner's verses, but sometimes I make up my own too, because it's fun.
Yeah, it is. Oh, that's so nice.
So
that's cool. So, have you had any interesting or major spiritual experiences that have influenced how you live your life, that you would like to share?
Yeah, I have had lots of little ones, mostly thoughts and feelings affect my outer experience. I've noticed that if I begin something with like great feeling and faith, that the universe will sort of, everything starts kind of rolling in that direction, and that's a really powerful feeling. It makes me feel a little bit more in control. a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've also healed myself physically with meditation. alone, just a handful of times. I'm not an expert at this, but
Wow.
it is an interest of mine. So I feel the more that I do sort of advance with it, but the more I need to adapt to new challenges and layers of healing. So I definitely feel that, and when I read Steiner, I really connect with that of like just kind of, okay, I'm slowly working through this kind of karma, and I'm definitely at this point, I feel like I'm in tune with the invisible a little bit. I'm very aware of just energy and people's energy, and so right now I'm learning how to be strong with different energies that come across, and keeping my own energy in alignment, so that I'm not absorbing everything. I'm also standing strong in my own self, and it's hard. It's a practice. It's not something that you can just do and it's done. It's just a continual working thing.
That's so true.
Being human.
Yeah, being human. Just when you think you've mastered something, a new challenge is around the bend.
Yeah, there's always levels. So I really like working with Steiner's ideas and moving forward. There's always so much reading I want to do that I don't. I wish I had more time to do. So I think as I get older, I'm going to dive more and more into that and seek more. But right now it's like, okay, so I'm focused on my children, and that's my primary focus right now. All my energy is going there.
Yeah.
But I do have to focus on myself too, because I can't do anything for them unless I'm balanced too. So
yeah, well,
I'm aiming for balance.
That's true. Yeah. So you were mentioning you'd like to read lots of Steiner stuff, and following you on Instagram and stuff, it seems like you are always reading something or mentioning something of his. Is there a particular series or book or anything that you're reading at the moment? Or are you reading like 10 of his things?
Well, aside from, I do kind of dive into all different things, like instead of sitting down with one book. Oh, I have sat down with one book from start to finish of his before. Right now, I'm kind of diving into different lectures because, like for example, I'm doing geography, so I just have been reading over and over again Steiner's lecture on geography and teaching that and bringing that to the 9-year-old. And so, I'll dip in that way. But I'm very passionate about Steiner's book called World Economy. And, I very much feel like I belong, when it comes to the threefolding, I feel like I belong in the social sphere. But I am very interested in how economics affects the social sphere, and it's fascinating to me. So, my husband is in finance, and so I've studied a lot of economic theories. Steiner seems to have one of the most workable solutions, and yet nobody seems to speak of it much. And when they do, I'm not really sure they fully understand it. So, again, going back to me being a child whose father gave her all of this currency that he sent me from all over the world.
Yeah, true.
So there's, Steiner really addressed this and talked about this of this economic thing, and so world economy really goes into that, and I think we need to think more clearly about the economy and how it affects people, and even parenting and culture and education. And so that seems really important. But I'm still diving into it and learning about it. I think there is a conference in North Carolina coming up this month, where I think it's Gary Lamb is coming to talk about threefolding. I don't know much about him, but I guess, I know some people who are going to go listen to that, and so it's about threefolding.
Are you going to it?
I cannot make it because it's about 5 hours away.
Oh.
So I can't make it, but I have a friend who's going to go and take notes.
Oh,
so
good.
Hopefully she'll share with me.
That's so good.
We'll go. So, yeah. So that's an interest of mine, but that's going to take a backseat to homeschooling and those lectures for now.
Yeah.
So
it might be something you have, like you say, you'll focus more on when you have a bit more time.
When I have more time, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, it's really fascinating that he came up with this idea of things that would heal the whole world. And these ideas just like Waldorf education, these ideas aren't well known. So more discussion.
Do you know it? Are you familiar with it enough to kind of outline it here?
Yes. Well, with threefolding, it would be there's three spheres of human for the human being, which would be the cultural side, the cultural sphere, and then there's the rights sphere, which is the laws, the government, and then there's the economic sphere. And basically Steiner called for those three wanting to be separate, but they do influence each other. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And so like we were talking about, you can think of, okay, so there's maybe the government or the rights sphere coming into education, which maybe belongs in the cultural sphere. So that's kind of an example of where something maybe needs to be separated out a little bit.
Right. So he's talking about having them slightly influence each other, but still be separate, and yet is as equally important. Do you mean?
Yes, because I think he saw the economic life kind of taking dominance over the other two spheres.
I would say, even in reference to that coding curriculum coming in, that's very, very clearly an economic push. It's not a cultural or a push. It's like, we need our economy to be better, so we are going to make children learn how to code.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Of where that's coming in, and where one sphere is kind of telling the other sphere what to be doing, and instead of just supporting the other sphere or dealing with its own activity. So Steiner said that we naturally were moving towards threefolding,
right?
But that's our natural setting. We do want to separate those. I mean, they do influence each other. They're not separate, in that way. They're not completely separate. They always will influence each other.
Of course.
He said that things were getting in the way of that natural separation. So, so that's interest. That's a long-term interest that, would be a big, it's a heavy thing to take on and think about. So but it's a definite fascination. For me.
Do you ever listen to the audio recordings? On Rudolf Steiner lecture. Wait, what is it? RudolfSteinerAudio.com. Do you listen to those?
Yes, I do sometimes when I get the chance. Yeah.
Those I find that really helpful, because I'm more of a audio learner, I guess. So I'm finding it really good to work my way through listening to those lectures, as well as reading them when I get the chance. But it's very good.
Yes, yeah, it does help with that, because then I can be doing some chores or things while I'm listening, which would help, as a mom.
Yeah, totally. So aside from being a mother and a teacher, are you working on any other projects? Do you have another aspect to yourself?
Yes, other things I'm working on right now. I am making, or have made, with my teenage son, we made the threefold human calendar, which is a 365-day calendar that, and it kind of takes the whole human being into account. It's an idea that I wasn't actually gonna make a calendar and put it out there for anyone, but I had a blank sketchbook, and I was thinking, well, how do I want to organize my year? I really need to have some balance, so I did it for my own self, and I started using a compass, a pencil and compass, to kind of draw this circle in the page, and then it just started gradually threefolding.
Wow.
As I was realizing that on its own, and it just sort of came out, and it grew out of a need to balance my days between what I'm thinking and what I'm doing and what I'm feeling, for my own self, and balance in teaching. So this will really help me, and I hope that at this point, now that we've made it, to help others as well. My son wants to be a graphic designer, and so he designed it in Adobe Illustrator. And it's interesting how a Waldorf child is now, he's becoming very techy, but I feel like, okay, now he's doing it at the right age.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because Waldorf can going into tech with all this creativity they had gotten from Waldorf. And so he helped me with that. So it'll be available for sale.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully soon at the end of the week. I still have to get the proof and make sure that it's all lined up.
Yeah.
Okay. So that'll be good.
So will it be? Is it?
And then I also have a small and very slow. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask if
Are you there?
yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Is it useful for Waldorf homeschoolers? Could it be used? Could teachers use it, or people that aren't homeschooling their kids? Can it be used for other purposes? Do you think?
Yes, I should mention that. Yes, absolutely. It can be used by anyone, even anyone who just any human being that needs more balance in their day. But I think obviously Waldorf teachers would be drawn to it.
Yeah.
And homeschoolers would be, so that they don't feel, anyone who just wants their schedule to be just a little less stressed out. I mean, in this modern age, everything is just so rushed. There's so much to do, and there's so much distraction. So I feel like it will keep me focused on, okay, here is my day tomorrow, and here's what I need to focus on, rather than, all these other distractions. So I think also it focuses on, okay, here's what I have to do tomorrow, which most calendars will do. Here's your to-do list. But I'm not just a human doing.
Yeah, that's
I'm also
true.
a human being. So I have a section for feelings, and where you can draw pictures. It's blank. There's no lines on that side, and so you can really draw how you're feeling that day, or how the things that you did affected how you feel,
So
or how you
cool.
feel affected what you did. So it's kind of like the threefold social organism of the whole planet, but it's in just the one human being. So then I have a thinking side where you can write your thoughts. You can start, planning the next day, or using your cognitive side.
This is brilliant. This is like I started bullet journaling before Phoenix was born, and then I stopped because having a newborn is intense. But this is so good, because I have to-do lists, but I always get distracted by them all, and then wish that I had like a journal for doing a little bit of drawing, and then pretty much the format you're talking about is exactly the format that I was trying to create, but I didn't have the capacity to do it. It sounds perfect for everybody.
Yeah, it's just great. It's just, for everyone, because what human being doesn't need to just, to focus on those three things? And there really wasn't a calendar or a planner out there that was helping me to de-stress from all the doing. And again, it's that same, side of things. I think I guess it could be tied to the economic, but it's this constant doing and not really noticing our inner life. And so it'll really help balance the day out. And I guess it's hard to describe with words. If you could just see the inside of the planner, then you go, okay. It's hard with a podcast to describe, but if you take a look at and the inside is, it's just very balanced with those three. And so anybody could really use this. And it really came within of just needing to just sort of be like, okay, there's also all these Waldorf homeschool planners out there, and they're wonderful, like how to, and people still might need those, like how to organize your block, your main lesson block,
right,
and all of that.
Yeah.
But I really just needed, okay, but I need my day to flow.
Yeah.
In a balanced way.
Yeah. That sounds really cool. Well, when you end up having it for sale, let me know, and I'll put the link in the show notes so people can go and find it and buy them.
Wonderful.
That sounds awesome.
That would be great. Thank you. And
yeah, I'm sure it'd be cool for your son too to see his hard work being actually used by other people. That it's useful not just for you and him, but actually it's a real gift for others.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Really cool.
I'm very proud of him. He really helped, design the layout and everything, so it was good work experience for him, and he learned a lot while doing it. So it was kind of also a homeschool activity, but also will help other homeschoolers. So it was just a great project all around.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So shall I move on to the next question? We're almost finished. I find this difficult myself, being a parent and having like different projects on the go. But how do you make sure that you look after yourself and don't get too drained? Because being a mum and a teacher is full on.
Oh, it is. Isn't that the ultimate question?
Yeah.
With this, and he also he takes over for at least an hour in the evening, so I
your husband
her a bit. He will take for about an hour. Probably between 6:30 and 7:30 in the evening. He just lets me go off and be alone, and he kind of plays a game with the kids, or helps them with whatever they need, or gives them a bath or anything, and then I read to them between like 7:30 and 8, and so then I take them back over and read. But I feel all recharged, and then I put them to bed. Of course, I have time after their sleep, which really helps too.
Yeah.
So I spend my free time reading. I read Steiner or other things. I do photography, so that's a hobby I love, and I play guitar, or I catch up on social media with other Waldorf moms. Instagram has been a huge support with all the homeschoolers there, and just the inspiration and the will to keep going and the sharing. It just really helps, and it's a creative outlet to share photography, but also just to meet moms all over the world that are doing it is so great. And we didn't have this even when I first started Waldorf homeschooling. There just wasn't that there. So it's really it's been great. So that's kind of what I do to keep balance, and sometimes also my husband will take them for a few hours weekend, and I'll get a big chunk of time to kind of do my own thing, or I'll get to do we had a crafting workshop with other Waldorf moms, and he'll take the kids and let me just kind of converse with them, and we'll have I love that because I love to get together with other women, chat, and it recharges my batteries for sure. So
that's so good.
I think people out there really need to find that alone time to connect with others that are doing what you're doing. So
it's so important. So that your photography is really beautiful. I love your Instagram feed. It's one of my favorites. It just looks like the most ideal version of Waldorf homeschooling ever.
Oh, thank you.
It's so nice.
I really love taking pictures. It's
do you just use your phone, or do you use a proper camera? Or a mixture?
I use both. I do a little of both. Sometimes it's hard to lug the big camera around, but I do prefer the lens on that. But sometimes I just take a quick snapshot with my phone. And I have been into photography since high school. Back then this was all film, and so I was always in the lab, and I was always experimenting, and loved the artistic side of taking pictures. I love to frame and compose, and I was a paint major. I really do like making a composition within this frame that I have, of composing the balance of it and the triangles, and it's just so fun for me. It's a creative so then I think that's me time. So photography is like, okay, this is just a me thing. Everything is the kids, everything. All my energy goes into the kids. But the photography, it's a great expression and outlet, and it's a way of communication now too.
It so is, and this kind of flows on to the last question about your thoughts on social media and finding your tribe and connecting with others, because it sounds like what you're saying is your photography is not only a way to document your children's lives and your life, but it's a way to, it's your creative expression, but it's also, like you said, a way to communicate with other people who are doing the same thing. It's really cool.
Yes, and
what
so
do you think?
It can communicate someone's inner self just the way art can, because you can take a picture of the same subject matter, and each person, each photographer will do it in such a different way. So I love seeing how different moms across the way they take pictures, and sometimes who they are really comes through, and I love that because everyone is so unique and so different, and it's just such a nice thing to watch. I did love it. And so I think social media, negative as we make it.
It's as what, sorry? As positive as we make it?
Explore ways to use it that... Oh, hello? Are you there?
Yeah, are you there?
Oh, I lost you for a minute, but I can hear you now.
Oh, right. I was just asking if you were saying that it's as positive as we make it, right?
Yes, I think it's as positive or as negative as we make it. Oh, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Skype's starting to get tired.
Oh, okay. I think we need to explore ways to use it that connect us more. I think everyone can be... There's an element where people are too afraid to share things. And I think that can say more about our lack of connection than anything. I think we really need to stop worrying what others think and just share and try to be a little bit more brave. I can understand why people won't share, though. But we have a real opportunity to help people and to get inspired and share ideas. But we need a lot of that balance of truth, beauty, and goodness put out there. And at the same time, we need to work with its limitations, because obviously social media has limitations. And but the whole technology is a bad thing. It's kind of, I don't know, that might be out of hand, because agriculture is a technology.
Yeah, a fork is a technology.
The wheel is a technology.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's how we use it that matters. So we can use this technology to move forward, or we can use it. It's going to be as just... It's a tool, so it's going to be however the humans are using it. So, of course, for children, it's different, though. They're using it too much. But I found such nice connections with other moms, and I love connecting and sharing. Like with you, I wouldn't have been able to connect with you if it wasn't for social media.
Exactly.
So it's a neat perspective to see where you are with your opposite seasons too. I think that's been really neat. When we're in our fall and you're in your spring. So, yeah, I think it's really neat.
It is cool. It's a really nice way to be in touch.
Yeah, and there's so much...
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, there's so much potential. Yeah, I think it's just a little choppy, the connection. Sorry about that. But there's so much potential for anthroposophy through technology, too. We can communicate, and it can grow that way. And so, yeah, I like social media, but I do think we need to balance it. I can't be on it too much, and
yeah.
But it's easy to get sucked in, so we have to be aware of that, and step away from it when we need to, and come back to it when we need to.
Yeah, it's a tool, so, and like you said, I think anthroposophy would benefit hugely from it being used well. Not just social media, but the internet and the internet in general. But you're right, it's finding the right way to do it that's not draining and that's life-giving and not life-taking, which technology can be. Just like your little girl said, she doesn't feel well after watching too much TV because it kind of it drains you. So we just have to find that balance. But that's just the human condition, isn't it? It's that Christ image of holding Lucifer and Armin at bay and being able to be the master of both. It's why we're here.
Exactly. And so it's really not an all, or I've seen people say, well, it's either all bad and we won't do it at all, or other people are just on it way too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to find some place in the center.
Yeah.
Where we're using it Yeah, and in a good way, even for adults, because I mean, it does it to children, but it does it to adults too. So we do have to put limits on our own self. I have to say, well, I'm going to do that later, and I'm going to do this now. Um, so yeah, but it's a great tool. It's exciting that, I mean, it's helping the Waldorf movement grow.
Yeah.
And it's doing so many good things. So I think if we just focus on those, then it will be great.
Agreed. Well, this is probably a good place to wrap it up, and I can hear my little boy wanting something to eat.
and you yes, you need to tend to that.
I do. Thank you so very much, Annie, for being able to talk, and just for the listeners, we had quite a fun time trying to catch each other with being on different time zones and babies needing naps and all that kind of stuff. But we made it work, and it's been such a pleasure.
Yes, mine too. Thank you for having me, and thank you for setting this all up and making it work. And I think it's just wonderful. The world really needs a Waldorf podcast, and to hear all the voices that need to be heard more, and to have a place to go for that. It's very exciting. So thank you so much for taking this on.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. I love talking, so it's fine. Yeah.
That's great. Well,
thank you, Annie.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank your family for giving us a space to do this. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much again for listening. For behind the scenes stuff, you can follow me on Instagram at themysticmama.nz, or you can email me at themysticdiscoveries@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. I hope you found this interesting, and I shall talk to you soon. Ka kite anō, and goodbye for now.